The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Judge Kesha Williams approached the building she'd called home for 23 years. In her casual Friday attire, a simple blazer and slacks, she looked like any other professional heading to work. Her briefcase contained the Peterson hearing files she'd reviewed the night before. Cases that would never be heard that day. Officer Marcus Rodriguez stood at his usual post. 6 feet of muscle and barely contained aggression. 3 stripes on his sleeve, 15 years on the force, and a reputation that made defense attorneys cringe. He spotted the black woman approaching, and his jaw tightened. Another one trying to sneak past security, he thought, stepping directly into her path. "Courthouse is for official business only," Rodriguez growled, his hand already moving to his holster, not for his gun, but for the handcuffs that hung beside it. The gesture was deliberate, practiced, meant to intimidate. "I have official business here," Kesha replied calmly, shifting her briefcase to reach for her identification. Rodriguez's eyes narrowed at what he perceived as defiance. In his world, people like her didn't talk back. They submitted, they apologized, they knew their place. The morning crowd was beginning to gather, other officers drifting closer, sensing the confrontation brewing. "Don't reach for anything," Rodriguez barked, though Kesha's hands were clearly visible. "You people always have excuses. Always think you're special." Behind Rodriguez, Officer Thompson pulled out his phone, already recording. This was going to be good. Rodriguez putting another one in their place. They'd laugh about it later in the break room. Another story about maintaining order, keeping the courthouse safe from undesirables. What none of them knew was that cameras were recording from every angle. The security system that Judge Williams herself had insisted on installing 2 years ago, with triple redundancy and automatic cloud backups. Every word, every gesture, every moment was being preserved in crystal clarity, creating evidence that would soon destroy everything. Officer Rodriguez thought he knew about Power. Part 2. When authority becomes abuse, the slap came without warning. Rodriguez's open palm connected with Kesha's face with such force that her head snapped sideways, her carefully styled hair whipping across her face. The briefcase flew from her grip, legal documents scattering across the concrete like fallen leaves. The Peterson hearing files, marked with the official seal of her court, landed in a puddle. "Another ghetto rat trying to sneak in," Rodriguez snarled, advancing on her as she steadied herself against the courthouse wall. His hand shot out, gripping her throat, pressing her back against the cold stone. "Filthy animals like you belong in cages, not courthouses." Kesha's vision blurred from the blow, but her mind remained sharp, cataloging every word, every witness, every camera angle. 23 years of judicial experience had taught her that evidence was everything, and Rodriguez was creating plenty of it. Officer Thompson laughed, his phone still recording. "Man, she really thought she could just walk in here." He chuckled to Officer Davis, who had just arrived. "Rodriguez knows how to handle these types." "Please," Kesha managed, her voice strained but controlled. "If you would just look at my identification." "Shut up." Rodriguez twisted her arms behind her back, the metal handcuffs biting into her wrists. "You're going to learn what happens when you disrespect law enforcement." A small crowd had gathered, now courthouse employees heading to work, lawyers arriving for morning hearings, citizens coming for jury duty. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one intervened. This was Officer Rodriguez, after all. He had connections, friends in high places, a reputation for being untouchable. Among the crowd, Bailey Henderson, a courthouse bailiff with 12 years of service, frowned. Something about this woman seemed familiar, but with her face turned away and Rodriguez blocking most of view, he couldn't place her. He'd later replay this moment in his mind 1,000 times, wishing he'd looked closer, acted sooner. Rodriguez began marching Kesha toward the courthouse entrance. making sure everyone saw her in handcuffs. This was what he lived for: the power, the authority, the ability to put people in their place. Today felt particularly satisfying. Part 3. The dangerous game inside the courthouse. Rodriguez straightened his uniform and prepared his story. He'd done this dozens of times before: arrest first, justify later. The system always backed the badge dot in the small holding room. Kesha sat quietly as Rodriguez filled out the arrest report. Her cheek had swollen, a purple bruise blooming across her dark skin, but her eyes remained focused, watching him fabricate charges with practiced ease. Trespassing, resisting arrest, attempting to access restricted areas, he muttered as he wrote, each lie flowing smoothly onto the official form. You know, none of that is true, Kesha said softly. Rodriguez looked up, his eyes cold. Truth is what I say it is. My word against yours, and guess whose word carries weight in this building? Down the hall, the morning's court proceedings were beginning without their presiding judge. Janet Morrison, Judge Williams's clerk for 8 years, was growing increasingly worried. The judge was never late, not once in all their years working together. She'd sent 3 text messages, each more urgent than the last, but received no response. Has anyone seen Judge Williams? Janet asked Patricia from the records department. No, but there was some commotion outside earlier. Rodriguez arrested some woman trying to break in. A chill ran down Janet's spine. What did she look like? I didn't see clearly, but Rodriguez was really laying into her. African American, professional dressed, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. Janet's phone clattered to the floor. She knew. Somehow she just knew. Meanwhile, Rodriguez was building his narrative. He'd pulled Thompson and Davis aside, coordinating their stories. She was aggressive, refused to comply, threatened me, he instructed. We all saw the same thing, right? Whatever you say, Rodriguez, Thompson agreed, still reviewing his video carefully edited to start after the initial assault. You know Harrison is sitting in for the criminal docket today, right? He always sides with cops. Rodriguez smiled. Judge Harrison, old school, tough on crime, and most importantly, someone who never questioned police testimony. This would be easier than he thought. But even as Rodriguez celebrated his apparent victory, the courthouse's digital surveillance system was uploading every frame of footage to multiple secure servers, creating an unchangeable record of the truth. Part 4. The breaking point. The courtroom was packed when Rodriguez took the witness stand. Word had spread about the morning's arrest, another criminal trying to infiltrate the courthouse. Another example of Officer Rodriguez keeping everyone safe. Judge Harrison, filling in for the criminal docket, looked every inch the stern authority figure Rodriguez had counted on. Your Honor, Rodriguez began, his voice steady and confident. I was conducting routine security when I encountered the defendant attempting to breach courthouse security. She was carrying suspicious documents, acting erratically, and became violent when questioned. From the defendant's table, Kesha watched him spin his web of lies with the skill of someone who'd done this many times before. The bruise on her face throbbed, but she remained perfectly still. Her hands folded despite the handcuffs still binding her wrists. The defendant claimed to be someone important, Rodriguez continued, adding a dismissive laugh. They always do: lawyers, judges, senators. It's a common tactic to avoid accountability. Prosecutor Walsh, a veteran of 15 years, nodded along. She'd worked with Rodriguez before, trusted his word, believed in the thin blue line. Officer Rodriguez, did the defendant assault you? Yes, ma'am. When I attempted to verify her identity, she became physically aggressive. I had no choice but to use minimum necessary force to protect myself and secure the courthouse. In the gallery, Henderson the bailiff shifted uncomfortably. The woman in handcuffs had lifted her head, and even from across the room, Something about her profile nagged at him. Where had he seen her before? These people, Rodriguez continued, warming to his theme, think they can just walk into any building, claim any identity, and when they're caught, they scream discrimination. Well, not in my courthouse. The words hung in the air like a challenge to fate itself. My courthouse. Several court employees exchanged glances. The arrogance was stunning, even for Rodriguez. Keisha finally spoke, her voice carrying across the courtroom with unexpected authority. Officer Rodriguez, you say your body camera malfunctioned this morning? Rodriguez's jaw tightened. Yes, technical difficulties. How convenient, Keisha murmured. Just loud enough for the court reporter to capture. Your Honor, Rodriguez said. Turning back to Judge Harrison, I've served this courthouse faithfully for 15 years. My record speaks for itself. Indeed it did, though not in the way Rodriguez imagined. Unknown to him, at that very moment, Chief Judge Margaret Carter was receiving an urgent call from courthouse security about the morning's footage. Part 5. The plan takes shape. The defendant may now present her statement, Judge Harrison announced, clearly expecting this to be a mere formality before sentencing. Keisha rose slowly, the handcuffs clinking softly. Despite everything, the assault, the bruise, the humiliation, she moved with a dignity that made the entire courtroom take notice. Thank you, Your Honor, she began, her voice carrying an unmistakable authority. I appreciate the opportunity to address these allegations. Something in her tone made Judge Harrison sit up straighter. This wasn't the rambling defense he'd expected. First, I'd like to address Officer Rodriguez's claim about body camera malfunction. Keisha's eyes found Rodriguez, who's beginning to shift nervously. Officer Rodriguez, are you aware that this courthouse maintains comprehensive surveillance coverage, with cameras positioned every 15 feet along all approaches? The color began draining from Rodriguez's face. Furthermore, Keisha continued, are you aware that your body camera automatically uploads footage to the county's cloud storage system every 60 seconds, regardless of whether the local device appears to be functioning? Prosecutor Walsh stood abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. The defendant can't simply make evidentiary demands. Actually, Keisha interrupted smoothly. Under Brady v. Maryland, I have the constitutional right to access potentially exculpatory evidence. Additionally, as a pro se defendant, I'm entitled under the Sixth Amendment to present evidence in my own defense. The legal citations flowed from her lips with the ease of someone who had spent decades in courtrooms. Judge Harrison's frown deepened. This was not normal. In the back row, Anderson the bailiff suddenly went rigid. The way she moved, the way she spoke, his mind finally made the connection, and his blood turned to ice. Officer Rodriguez testified that I was trespassing, Keisha continued. However, I was on a public sidewalk, approaching the main entrance. Under Committee for Industrial Organization, public sidewalks adjacent to government buildings are traditional public forums where citizens have a constitutional right to be present. Rodriguez's attorney, he hadn't thought he'd need one, was nowhere to be found. He stood alone as his carefully constructed story began to crumble. Your Honor, Keisha said, reaching into her jacket pocket slowly, deliberately. I have here documentation that will conclusively establish both my identity and my legitimate reason for being at this courthouse this morning. She pulled out a leather wallet, and even from across the room, the gold judicial seal was unmistakable. Part 6. The downfall begins. The 15-minute recess felt like an eternity. Word spread through the courthouse like wildfire, whispered conversations in hallways, frantic text messages. People literally running to courtroom 3 to witness what was about to unfold. In the holding room, Anderson stood before Keisha, his face pale with horror. Judge Williams, Your Honor, I'm so sorry. I didn't recognize you, and when they brought you in—" "It's all right, Henderson," Kesha replied quietly. "You weren't part of this. But I need you to do something for me. Go to my chambers and bring my judicial robes. The black ones with the gold trim. And Henderson, bring my gavel too. The one from my swearing-in ceremony." As Henderson rushed out, Kesha picked up her phone, now returned to her, and dialed Chief Judge Margaret Carter. "Kesha, thank God. We heard there was an incident. Margaret, I need you to secure all surveillance footage from this morning. Every angle, every camera, with multiple backup copies." "Already done." "Kesha, what Rodriguez did?" "We have it all. The security chief called me 20 minutes ago. It's worse than you can imagine." "Oh, I can imagine quite well, Margaret. I lived it." Meanwhile, Rodriguez sat in the courtroom, his world crumbling around him. Officers Thompson and Davis had quietly slipped out, abandoning him to his fate. His phone buzzed with message after message, other officers who had heard what was happening, warning him to get a lawyer, to run, to do something. But there was nowhere to run. Not from this dot when court resumed. The gallery was standing room only. Lawyers had abandoned their own cases to witness this. Court reporters from other courtrooms had come to observe. Even Judge Harrison had been replaced. He'd recused himself immediately upon learning who the defendant really was. Then came the announcement that would be burned into everyone's memory. "All rise." Henderson's voice boomed with more authority than anyone had ever heard from him. "Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Kesha Williams presiding." The silence was absolute. Rodriguez's legs gave out, and he collapsed into his chair. Judge Williams entered in her full judicial robes, and suddenly everyone understood. This wasn't just any judge. This was their judge. The woman who had presided over this courthouse for 23 years. The woman Rodriguez had called a filthy animal. Part 7. The big climax. Officer Rodriguez. Judge Williams said quietly from her rightful place behind the bench, "You may remain standing." Rodriguez couldn't have stood if his life depended on it. He sat trembling as Judge Williams pulled out a tablet and began playing the surveillance footage. The courtroom watched in horrified silence as the truth unfolded on screen. The unprovoked approach. The slap that sent Judge Williams's head snapping sideways. Rodriguez's voice, clear as day. "Filthy animals like you belong in cages, not courthouses." Several people in the gallery stood and left, unable to watch more. Others sat transfixed, witnessing the complete destruction of a man who had thought himself untouchable. "Officer Rodriguez," Judge Williams continued, "let's examine your distinguished career, shall we?" She opened a thick folder. 47 formal complaints in 15 years. "Let me read you some highlights." She proceeded to methodically destroy him, complaint by complaint, revealing a pattern of abuse that should have ended his career years ago. Rosa Delgado, the grandmother he'd brutalized. Jamal Washington, the honor student he'd framed. Dr. Michael Johnson, arrested for living in the wrong neighborhood. "Your arrest statistics are particularly interesting," Judge Williams noted. 87% of your arrests involved people of color in a district that's only 58% minority. Your use of force reports show physical violence in 63% of arrests involving black suspects, compared to 12% involving white suspects. Rodriguez's attorney, hastily summoned during the recess, was scribbling notes frantically, knowing there was no defense for any of this. "But here's what's most damning," Judge Williams continued. "This morning, you didn't just assault a random citizen. You assaulted a federal judge who has been working with the FBI Civil Rights Division to investigate patterns of police misconduct in this department." The revelation hit the courtroom like a bomb. Rodriguez finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "I didn't know ... You didn't know because you didn't care to look. Judge Williams replied. You saw a black woman and made assumptions. You saw someone you thought was powerless and decided to assert your dominance. She stood, walking around the bench to face him directly. Officer Rodriguez, you said this morning that people like me need to learn our place. Well, let me tell you exactly what my place is. My place is ensuring that bullies like you can never again hide behind a badge while terrorizing innocent citizens. The gavel came down with the sound of finality. You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Part 8. Justice delivered 6 months later. The ripple effects continued to transform the entire justice system. Officer Rodriguez sat in federal prison, his badge gone, his pension forfeited, his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale told at police academies about what happens when power corrupts absolutely. The federal investigation Judge Williams had ordered uncovered systemic corruption throughout the department. 12 officers were terminated. 4 supervisors faced criminal charges. The entire department was placed under federal oversight, with new policies requiring mandatory body cameras with triple redundancy backup systems. Most importantly, the 432 cases Rodriguez had tainted were reopened. Innocent people walked free. Families were reunited. Communities that had lived in fear of Rodriguez and officers like him finally began to trust that justice was possible. Judge Williams became a national symbol of judicial courage. She spoke at law schools, trained police departments, and worked with Congress on criminal justice reform. But she always returned to her courthouse, to her courtroom, where she continued to serve justice with the same dedication she'd shown for over 2 decades. The courthouse itself was renamed the Justice Williams Federal Courthouse. A bronze plaque near the entrance bore a simple inscription. Here, justice finally found its voice. Janet Morrison, her faithful clerk, had the surveillance video edited into a training film that was shown to every new officer, prosecutor, and judge in the district. The moment when Rodriguez's face went from arrogance to horror as judge, Williams took the bench became known as the Reckoning. Officers Thompson and Davis, who had laughed while recording the assault, were also terminated and faced federal conspiracy charges. Their cases became textbook examples of how passive participation in injustice makes one equally culpable. The young lawyers who witnessed the proceedings that day went on to become civil rights attorneys, public defenders, and advocates for justice reform. They would often say that watching Judge Williams that day taught them what courage looked like, not the absence of fear, but the determination to do what's right despite it. Rodriguez's former victims began coming forward, emboldened by seeing him finally held accountable. The county paid out millions in settlements, but more importantly, each victim received something money couldn't buy. Validation that what happened to them was wrong, and that it mattered. Today, a new generation of officers patrol those courthouse steps. They're trained differently, supervised closely, and held accountable immediately. They know the story of Officer Rodriguez and Judge Williams. They know that the badge they wear is a privilege, not a license for abuse. And somewhere in federal prison, Rodriguez sits in his cell, finally understanding what it means to be powerless, to be judged, to face consequences. The man who once declared the courthouse his now knows the truth. Justice belongs to everyone, and no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. The end, remember. Justice may be blind, but she sees everything. And sometimes, when the moment is right, justice wears judicial robes and carries a gavel engraved with truth.